Welcome back, everybody. It's your boy Nate, aka Little Potato Boy, aka Big Piss Chug, aka Young Crash Out, aka I'm tired of this bit. Oh, sorry I ain't been with you recently. Sorry for the absence. First, I got mentally depressed. Then, I got physically sick, and I think that's mainly just because I'm spiritually unfocused. I ain't been praying my rosary recently. I've been getting all depressed about things that happened in the past. I ain't been eating correctly recently. I ain't had my oatmeal with my turmeric that I champion. I champion all the time for how good it is. I ain't been eating it recently. Easter was a very, very difficult week for me, and this week has been just like the inevitable crash out afterwards since I don't have to do anything. Hold it back, hold it back, hold it back. But things are okay now. I apologize for the unscheduled absence. I'll try not to have it happen again. But yeah, I ate a whole freaking thing of these. I got depressed, ate a whole thing of those, then I got physically sick afterwards, and then I was just like sick for like a day and a half. Still feeling kind of bad, but hey, I'm back. What's up? Yeah, sorry, I look kind of like crap right now. I'm gonna shower after the stream, but I just wanted to get this one in. I got some good notes. I ain't been working much on the podcast recently. I apologize. Gives me no pleasure to say that, but recently I just been watching Brent Daniel stream, Zero Lenny stream. I ain't been watching much YouTube. I've been spending most time in my bed. You know, at least I got to see some cool new games. It really feels like there's kind of a blitzkrieg going on in the video game sector. Everybody's releasing their secret weapon so that they can try and be the one on top when the ship finally goes down, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if the ship's going down. We always romanticize our suffering so much more than it actually ends up being these days. Now, I'm not saying things are going to be easy in the future, but shouldn't be sad for no reason. It doesn't help. Anyways, I left off last stream why I brought up Carolyn Levitt. She had a nose job. This was basically confirmed by people going into old pictures and checking stuff out. And the more you look at it, the more you can see her resemblance to the late pop star Michael Jackson. Sorry. AOC's done more harm to the ecosystem conversation than help. The people who are actually helping are the ones going, oh yeah, sure, you're interested in native permaculture stuff? I got you. Here's how you do X, Y, and Z. And here are the people that you can contact to help set you up with it. But her once-in-a-lifetime speaking mentality, that was more prescient in Martin Luther King's day, is more of a LARP of the past. It isn't the only time people will see that particular speech. People record stuff. People pick stuff apart. You got to be super focused with these issues because they cherry pick your failures, and that's not gonna stop anytime soon. You got to be very focused. And Bernie Sanders himself is a good speaker because he stays extremely focused and he doesn't go pie in the sky. He stays very grounded on what America needs, which is to move towards a public-private partnership as opposed to sheer private ownership and complete desolation of all manners of government health programs that are designed to make people healthier so that the United States has a bigger worker population, which as soon as the United States didn't need a bigger worker population after the mass outsourcing of people's jobs by Republicans and Democrats alike, then the healthcare system was no longer deemed necessary by the state, and so it got pushed into a more private setting, hundreds of rural hospitals closing down over the course of these decades. And lots of good people who try very hard to make the world a better place out of work. Lots of people having to drive 100 miles to get to a hospital and dying on the way. And that's a big issue. And of course, we have all this stuff involving transgenderism that pop up as like the number one issue regarding, well, should we give people free healthcare? Because if we give people free healthcare, they'll just abuse, the They'll abuse the free healthcare system by saying that there's something that they're not and getting stuff that they don't actually need and ending up down the road, say a decade down the road, in a tremendously worse position than they were. Year to year, they might look at it and go, oh, I'm so sad because people are telling me something that I don't want to hear. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, a lot of times you look back and you go, those people actually had my best interest at heart. And, that's a big issue that the pharmaceutical companies, like if you are a post-operation transgender individual, you have sold your entire existence to the pharmaceutical companies. You you have to take hormone replacement therapy. Usually you have to take pain medication, and a lot of times you need antibiotics. And that is an entire system set up around unlimited pharmaceutical gibs. And if you just cut out, the middleman in that situation, and you just make it from the government directly to people's tables, then that choice has to actually be limited. Like it right now is a private choice meted out by a private healthcare system that does, and indeed we do have the most transgender individuals in this country because we have the highest accessibility for people of means to get these things. But if it was just like, no, we're not going to offer that here, and do essentially what Britain has done, which they call a war on transgenderism, where the government does not give free healthcare systems and they have to go out of the country in order to get it. Whereas the HHS isn't perfect, the wait lines on that are pretty intense. So say you need an emergency situation, your wait time on that emergency situation is going to be like 8 times longer than that in the United States. And that's going to usually end up being very bad for a lot of situations. But that also, I'm a big proponent of this, trains you more to be preventative. I know that's a very harsh thing to say, but in a lot of the instances where, like, you had a heart attack, if you aren't known by your doctor to have these congenital issues that you've always had and that you end up getting scheduled in with the help of your parents at a very early age to get medication for, and you develop a heart issue later, that's usually because of individual choices. Now, sometimes it can come from environmental poisoning, which is always bad, but individual choices should be monitored more. You shouldn't just have unlimited get out of jail free cards paid for by the government when you abuse your body so much, which is ultimately what we had like in the 80s. And that's why we had like a 40% obesity rate in the United States in the late 80s. That was also when cigarettes were switching their marketing and switching their direct financing. Like all the cigarette companies were being funded by parent companies before. That money got switched over to fast food. And it happened around the same area. The big testing ground for fast food as an addiction mechanism happened around the same area that I grew up in, which was just tobacco fields, but at the same time rolled out like 500 different types of fast food. And it was like a petri dish for testing all that addictive potentiality in fast food out. And this was before our healthcare system really started to dissolve down to pieces like it is today. And so Bernie has points, but a lot of his points are ensconced in the fact that he looks at America through the patriotic lenses of somebody who saw it in the 60s and 70s. And so he doesn't really know how bad the zeitgeist in the entire country, each individual American soul, has gotten since the 90s, since 2001. It's been really, really bad. And I think the big exemplar of that, unfortunately, if you're part of that, you got to understand punk culture, counterculture, your counterculture crap. It took a lot more work to get into the hippies, but your counterculture crap was weaponized exactly as the hippies were, exactly as hip hop got weaponized from a countercultural force into a new cultural force. See, first it was hippies, then it was hip hop, then it was punk, and it isn't barely a racist thing, and it isn't even a class-based thing. What it is people go into the counterculture thinking they're getting the counterculture. They're actually just getting teed up for being the squares in the next generational fold. You see. Now we've turned to nostalgia. We've turned to various forces of nostalgia. We just went through superhero nostalgia. Superheroes were big in the 60s and 70s. We're going through video game nostalgia. Video games were super big in the 90s and 2000s. We really are. We're going through video game nostalgia. I hope everybody's enjoying Oblivion. You know, I haven't. Of course, I've been sick. And probably not going to spend money on that anyways. But I can go back and play the original Oblivion and have fun with it. I hope everybody's been having fun with that. I hope everybody's been having fun with all the new video games that are coming out. Hope everybody's been having fun with the Minecraft movie. You know, made $1 billion. I'm just saying, you know, enjoy your slime, enjoy your slop, but don't let it consume you. Don't let it turn your brain into slime and slop. It's just another way they can get at you, man. So anyways, let's get off of this tangent. Let's get into the notes. Jordan Peterson is in line with the Jungian and Christological archetype of the Luciferian intellect. He does not realize that, while fighting monsters, one must ensure they do not become the monster. It's so bloody obvious what has happened. The doctor needs to clean his room. You know, there's really no reason for the French and the English to hate each other. Like, seriously, like, the more you study, the more you realize there's no real reason for them to hate each other. But the Pakistanis and the Indians, that's a whole nother level of hatred. That's gonna be some, there's gonna be some sparks flowing around that one. Aye. I'm so sad to find out Brendan Daniel went on antidepressants. But as I'm a longtime fan, I can tell something has been kind of off. You know, and as long as he keeps the dose low on the Propyrion, he won't incur liver toxicity. He's also a big guy, so he has to be very careful. You know, his liver is bigger, so the dosage might require more, and it could cause a higher level of liver toxicity because of that. It's one of the less damaging ones still, but it's still damaging, and it sucks, but his cat died on April 20th last year after only 4 years on this beautiful earth, and that hurt him so bad. I get that. I feel that. I really do feel that. Now, Hitler was also born on 420. Rome was born on 421. Imagine if ancient Rome had weed. You know what they say about alcoholic societies versus stoner societies? One is psychotic and the other is stupid. I think Scotty Kilmer's brain should be studied when he passes away from an accident involving putting live hornets in his AC system while driving 210 miles an hour around Appalachian mountain passes. It's a good idea. Not the former part, but the studying his brain part. Not the latter part, but the former part. I don't think the essence of entertainment is dressing up in silly outfits. I really, really feel like that's missing the mark. At least when it comes to guys. Voices is one thing, but that might also be a generational thing. I feel like the people that, like, we grew up watching AVGN, Angry Video Game, AVGN, Nostalgia Critic. Nostalgia Critic especially is poignant to this point that when we were growing up, movies were still the biggest thing, so dress up was a huge thing in entertainment. Nowadays, you get video games as the main form of entertainment, the main form of storytelling, and so what you can do with your voice actually becomes way more in the spotlight than how you look. Because there's so many ways of substituting that, and I think VTubers is a nasty little example of that. So what you can do with your voice is incredibly more poignant these days than where you can dress up, but I think it's always been, you know, how you can lean into your role, not just how you dress up. And it's great to hear a silly voice pulled out in an apropos situation to a specific bit, but I think Hollywood poisoned people's brains in regard to dress up and entertainment, thinking that that was all you need to be successful, because Hollywood was built on societal manipulation, cultural manipulation, generational manipulation, and stuff like that. Naturally, video games are already, especially if you look at Fortnite and the merge, you know, where that entire concept came from in literature. That is a new concept. Like, we've been working on Lovecraftian concepts for 100 years now. The merge thing, where you get different universes, different fantasy worlds, and you merge them into one. You see that happening all over the place. And that is a lot more popular, like, 20 years ago till now, as opposed to any other time that you can see in history. You see? You get Batman versus Superman, something that's so utterly dumb. You know, it's just a completely and utterly dumb. Why would Batman know to get Krypton? Why would all this? And I think a lot of that does happen from the fact that a company buys up or already owns all of these concepts. They run out of ideas for an individual concepts. They start to mix and match. And when we did grow up with, us millennials, we grew up with things like Justice League. And that is, I think, the first poignantly taken steps towards just full-blown Fortnite. You know, some days I feel like I'm eating breadcrumbs under the table. Some days I'm gravid with sauce. Oh, and even anybody who says Stephen King is peak Coke thoughts obviously has never seen heavy metal. That is peak Coke thoughts. John is probably the most popular name in the West. In Boheme is Jan. In Slavic it's Ivan. Yeah, seriously, Ivan. That's the word for John in all the Slavic languages. Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it wild that everybody knows about Jeffrey Epstein now? The zeitgeist is significantly different. Israeli spies are literally the worst at doing their jobs of all time. Gotta say, the Troll Toll sketch, it feels much weirder now from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It feels way dirtier now, even though previously it already was kind of like just barely passable. And I feel bad for Danny DeVito for essentially being, I don't know if he came up with that, but I feel like he was essentially forced into that role. I don't know. You never know. You never know. He advertises for Jersey Mike's, the most aggressively Italian eatery. Like, so Italian that it wraps back around to being like normie slop. It's so Italian it loses its Italianness, right? So yeah, it just circles back around to being blank American, almost McDonald's level of food. Where some days it'll be fire, but most of the days you're gonna get way too much sauce and everything's gonna taste a little off, and and it'll be very, very unhealthy for you. Firehouse trounces them all. Sorry if you don't have a firehouse near you. I feel bad for you. Firehouse trounces them all. Very expensive though. Very expensive. Yeah, everybody knows about Jeffrey Epstein now. Everybody's gonna internalize that. Everybody has already stopped trusting Israelis. Everybody's already figured out, oh, they're doing horrible things with our politicians. That's why our politicians are so evil, and that's why things are so bad and everybody's suffering so much. So, like, literally, like, you could expect a potentiality. Now, I think I genuinely do believe in my heart of hearts that they're too sissy to actually pull the trigger on this. But the Samson option is when basically everybody in the world figures out through the internet, these guys are monsters. They've been stealing stuff all the time. They've been making the world a tremendously worse place at a rate of which could cause a domino effect that could ruin the entire planet. And these are the main actors behind it. And I think the Samson option is a self-defense situation in that sort of scenario, where they just press the reset button on everybody living above ground and go back into their little holes, which they've got lots and lots of underground stuff over in Israel. I mean, of course, like the normal Jews that get used as a meat shield, they live up on the surface, and then the evil, wicked Zionists, they live like 17 stories underground. And I'm not joking, that isn't like a crazy conspiracy thing. That you can find that out. You can find information about that online pretty easily. Want to know why? Because Israeli spies are terrible at their job. They don't even need to be tortured like they tortured innocent, German people that had already surrendered, that weren't guilty of any individual crime. They tortured them. The Israeli spies don't even need to be tortured. They just spew their guts. They like to brag about their war crimes. They enjoy that, so it is what it is, Thank God, like, God isn't encoded into the behavior of humanity, and the laws of nature and morality are very, very deep and struck deep into our codes. We can't avoid, even if we pretend that we can. And that's probably the reason why the Gnostics think that God is evil, is because it always ends up coming to back to bite. The way that things have been programmed always come back to bite evil. and good always ends up triumphing over evil in the long run. You know they hit the Pope with a silver hammer 3 times after they die? I just want to know, is the hammer named Maxwell? Because if it is, John Lennon has some splaining to do. That's plagiarism, buddy. And for that matter, which Maxwell? Ghislaine Maxwell? What were the bugs trying to tell us with that psychoslop? And that song is pretty much psychoslop, though. It's a really strange one in Abbey Road, which is mostly good songs, like relaxing, enjoyable, uplifting songs. And then there's this thing about a kid that goes around hitting people with a hammer. It's wild. You just gotta wonder why it's named Maxwell. You just gotta wonder. And by the by, just to know, the Latin Mass proponents aren't about anal retentiveness in most cases. It's simply about how much liberty can be taken with translation in the vernacular and how that detracts from the main message, where language is complicated. You can intuit feelings pretty easily. Languages are a tool, and language can very easily be misinterpreted. So they use very literal wording to pass down like literal instructions generation after generation. And if you allow yourself to pick a word, translate it, go, well, actually, this could mean one of 16 different things, and recontextualize the message, you get the destruction of Christendom that you see in the modern era. And that's legitimately the reason why people have argued for the conservation of the Latin Mass. Now, naturally, I don't think that you could ever put the toothpaste back in the bottle. The fact that people know that it's bad to mistranslate the Mass should be a lesson that stays in perpetuity. The Latin Mass should never be banned, but the Latin Mass should also simultaneously, in my feelings, not be forced on people, but instead have people allow themselves to see this point and then come back towards the more traditional meterings of their faith, while simultaneously having the resources to actually find out what the priest is saying in Latin, English, which you can get through a missal. As it's complicated, and as I said, you're not going to put the toothpaste back in the tube by forcing everybody by order of Inquisition to say the Latin Mass exclusively and then burning people at the stake if they don't. That's going to make things worse. So you got to make sure that you handle that with a soft touch. The only real 2 guys is Zuppi and Pietro Parolin or whatever. Those are the only 2 guys that would completely and utterly destroy Catholicism, Christendom, and like as a radiating factor. The closer that Protestants get to Novus Ordo Catholicism, the worse Christianity gets in general. It turns into a pure ape of the church. They kindly talk and emulate in the proper ways of looking like a true Mass, while simultaneously not clutching to the very serious, very stringent, and sometimes very uncomfortable ways of doing things the right way. And of course, that uncomfortableness that has been misinterpreted into Massagism, that has been used as a weapon against the Catholic Church for a long time. But what we really need to see is people coalescing around, first, the worship of Jesus Christ, and second, the proper way of doing things. And if you get Zuppi, you get a literal pedophile, like a pedophile homosexual defender, and one of the worst. Like, people say his vibes are good. He's got a very creepy face, and he's one of the worst ones on the potential list. Now, he's probably not close to it. Or you get Pietro Parolin, which is the #1 guy on a lot of the betting websites. He is the deep state personified. He is as close as you can get to an American politician in the Vatican. It would spell doom for the entire planet and doom for Christendom. Naturally, you can't have Christendom without human beings on the planet that are connected to it and nurture it and are nurtured by it. Yep, that's that. I can officially say, seeing it both gone and back, 4chan is a force of tremendous evil in this world. Tremendous evil in this world. A Khajiit walks up to you, pulls out his iPhone 7, starts playing all the single furries for you. What do? Don't think about that too much. I think it's kind of crazy that Hitler was fascinated with the technicalities of painting and architecture, and the Jewish-run art school he tried to join was like, ha! No! You see, we just work on assigning arbitrary value to art so it can be used as money laundering. We don't actually care about what's good or bad, just money laundering. And yeah, that'd piss me off too. But like, that's something you go, why, when you're younger, because you're interested in furthering your skills. When you get older, you're just like, oh, that entire scene is evil. And that permits you to be more disillusioned with even the finer things in your society, thus craving for a restructuring. You know, it makes sense. I wouldn't agree with the methodology in any way, shape, or form, but it makes sense, especially given the multiple tribulations that Germany had gone through in regards to purging the peasant population and then essentially freeing up free real estate for, state-sanctioned. That's exactly where you get Prussia, the army with a state. You get this sort of like pseudo-communist socialist, pro-military, pro-internal strife, internal conflicts culture. And that's the recipe for disaster. And I'm not sure if Germany is even better off, after World War II than they were before. I did watch a couple of Dresden concerts, though, recently, and at least they're doing a little bit better than London, but you can find all the pretty stuff in London, too. It's just a shell of its former self. Like, true beauty has escaped it, and now it just, the phantasm, the ghost flickering around it is all that you can kind of really see. Speaking of Weimar, stripped clubs are like native flowers being mogged by invasive honeybees, so that the bee species the flower is paired to gets nothing. And then the flower gets some foreign disease that it has no resistance to and dies. Many such cases. People always saying ontologically evil this and ontologically evil that, but let's talk about some ontological good. Manatees and fruit trees and warm days and fresh breezes. Oh wait, I'm just describing Florida before politics. Alright y'all, this is good enough rambling for today. I hope to get my projects out soon so you can enjoy it and go haha hee hee. Sorry about the absence. Now, we'll get back. Scheduling expected to be resumed. Until further notice. Cheers.